I had to drive to South Knoxville from Powell, and it was like an hour drive every morning. But anytime that there was a wreck, which going down Chapman is almost all the time, it would make it like an hour and a half, which was never enjoyable. Okay, there we go. All right, the camera is up now. Now, before we move on with the presentation, I wanted to show this map, and I have another one that we're going to show in a second. And this is the one I think would make more sense. So this is a map of a resolution for the UN to recognize Palestine as a state. All of the green is everyone who voted yes. Black is those who abstained. Red is those who voted no. What do you realize? Like, what stands out about this map?
Why did US know?
It's all North America.
Totally.
Yeah.
And what's the other thing in Europe? What is that one?
I think this is Switzerland, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Or maybe Austria.
Oh, yeah.
Is it Austria?
It could be, yeah.
That's amazing.
So yeah, I want to feel this map because you'll notice like the U.S. stands out as a minority, and we're going to show another map in just a second. But this map is going to influence some of the sources in the presentation in here. Yeah.
And this was in 1947?
No, this was 2018.
Oh,
Let me look back on this one. I have to look. This was a more recent.
it's not in scale either.
It's not in scale? What do you mean?
The US and Canada is not as large.
Oh.
Oh, that, yeah.
Here's another map. So this one, I think I cut out the date on it. But here's another one of those this one's a little older, that supports Palestine as a state. This shows a little bit more, but one thing that's just interesting, I think this is the one that the printer did not want to print out. I'll email just this graphic too, because this will go in detail and show some of the different countries that don't recognize Israel, but do recognize Palestine. And you might be surprised to know that it's kind of close, actually. This is going to influence some of the things that we do in here, especially this map. Because just as us being Americans and in the English-speaking world, like we're going to get most of our news sources from those who speak English, we are predetermined to be more supportive of Israel. And so that is influencing a lot of some of the sources we're going to bring in here, as well as some of the interviews that we played last time and some of the things we'll look at today. I just wanted to keep that in our minds, because when you look at this, you go, oh, I might not be as neutral as I thought I was, just because of what I've been exposed to. Okay. All right, Danny?
Already?
Yeah, time is yours.
Okay.
Do you want to sit in the stool?
Well, no, I'm fine.
Here, I'll sit down.
And just let me know what you want to cover. I'll just basically take questions because there's a lot of questions. I'm sure a lot of you have an interest in this, what's going on now, especially with the current situation. But you also may have some questions about history, such like that. I can only give it from my perspective, being that my parents are Palestinian. Just to give you a little background, I'm a member here of the Church of the Ascension. Grew up at St. James on Broadway. My parents were Anglican in Ramallah. We're from a town, Christian town, that is about 7 miles north of Jerusalem. And what had happened was my family's been there, 500 years in the same place, same land, same everything. In 47, my dad's uncles were already here in the States, and things were starting to heat up there. There was a lot of things going on as far as turmoil. The British were trying to get out. The Zionist movement was really heavy and militarized and such like that. So he graduated the French school there, said, come on over here. He went to the University of Tennessee. After that, he got married and then grew up here. So in Ramallah, the town that they were from, and my heritage is from, they were Anglican there. There was a British influence there. My dad used to he used to tell me stories about when he was growing up, he would take his grandmother, and there would be a missionary come in from Bath, England, and he would take them around in a donkey cart, basically, to the other towns of the villages around the area. So the way Palestine was in history was typically there were Christian towns, there was Muslim towns, and there were Jewish towns. And they were close to each other. They all got along. They were sister cities, basically, and towns. That was pretty much throughout history until, as Alexander mentioned, the Zionist movement started to take hold in the late 1800s. And the Zionist movement was a movement, did y'all cover basically?
We have watched about 30 minutes of different historical
So
videos.
y'all kind of know that, but basically Zionism was a European movement because of the pogroms and the discrimination that Jews had in Europe. They were looking for an alternative to get Jews back to the homeland, which happened to be Palestine. So that's kind of the history. Like I said, our family has been in the same place, 500 years. We have a huge extended family. We have, being from a village, the townspeople there would either marry someone in another Christian village like Bethlehem, maybe, or there's Taiba, there's Nazareth, there's all kinds of Christian villages around there. And about probably the early 1900s, the Christian population of Palestine was probably 20%. Unfortunately, once Israel was, of course, became a state in 48, with the tensions, with the forced removal of people from their towns in Israel, with the destruction of those towns, the population in Palestine now is less than 2%. The Christians typically had the opportunity to move because they had relatives either in Europe or in the US already. So they were a little more mobile in being able to move, especially when the tensions got heavy. They couldn't educate their kids properly. They would move. So Christian population, very important to know, that has been there, of course, since the time of Jesus. A lot of people will get, especially my cousins, I really haven't been asked this directly other than a couple of times, and they'll say, well, when did you convert over from being Muslim? And because they might not be thinking, because they're used to seeing Western-looking Christians, we were from there, that's where it originated. It wasn't in Europe, but it was in Palestine. So that's kind of, we have a large extended family here, a large extended family in the States. We still have relatives there in Ramallah. And again, so from the map, again, it's about 7 miles north of Jerusalem, just to give you an idea of it. But
I actually meant to put the map up while you talked.
When I first visited Palestine, it was 88. I went with a cousin who was born there. Her mom still lived there, actually in Jerusalem. Her dad was an agent, had a company that represented TWA. They lived in Jerusalem. Stayed with them at their house. They had Muslims and Jewish neighbors and such like that. The next time I went was 93. At that point, there was tension there. Before, you could move around pretty easily between Israel and Palestine. In fact, a lot of the Israelis back then, they came from Arab countries. So the ones that came from Arab countries would speak Arabic. They would listen to Arabic. They had Arabic culture. They were darker skinned like me. You could walk through Jerusalem and you'd hear Arabic. You wouldn't know, and it didn't matter if they were Jewish, Muslim, or Christian. They were all. By the time 93 came around, when I went again, there was tension there. The Intifada had taken place at the uprising. Israel was cracking down on a lot of stuff. There was tension, and things began to change. Still, for the most part, okay. But when I went back subsequently, we would take actually Americans, part of the group I'm with, we would actually take Americans there to actually see firsthand what is going on, to be a witness to what is going on. Because here you kind of get as Alexander showed you, kind of that North America, that U.S. view of Palestine, where the rest of the world is different. You get a limited scope of things here sometimes. If you were to maybe look at BBC News or other news, or even Israeli news, you get a different perspective of the Palestinians. So in regards to, that, the perspective, we thought it would be great to take people over there, let them see firsthand what is going on. We take them to Israel and to Palestine. We didn't want any bias there. And I encourage you, you're only hearing one side here, and I know the Palestinian perspective, but I encourage each of you to do your own research and thought process and use your God-given abilities of thinking for yourself, and maybe even a little outside the box when you see sources. Some of the best sources we have are actually Jewish groups that actually are against the Israeli occupation. You'll see that a lot, quite a bit. Evangelicals, you mentioned evangelicals. You'll find that the younger demographic of both American Jews and evangelicals now are more of 50-50 on support of Israel and Palestine. And that's because they've been probably exposed to more, and they know what's going on, either through social media or finding out themselves. There's a great change in that, where the older ones, like us, 50, 60, 70, wholeheartedly mostly support Israel because of what they've grown up with, what they've heard, what they've seen in the news, things like that. So I think the younger ones have a different perspective, and especially the younger evangelicals, the younger American Jews have a different perspective than their parents do. But by the time, getting back to my story, by the time I went back in say 2014, 2012, the tone of everything in Israel had changed quite a bit. Used to, I could walk through, go there, go visit Jerusalem. Since then, since in the last 15, 20 years, it's become, you can feel the tension, you can feel almost the thought of, and you see it sometimes, and people will tell you, if you say, well, you're back from Ramallah in Palestine, they'll say, there's no such thing as Palestine. They'll say, well, you don't belong here. They'll say, well, it's like, it's not your country, it's like almost a denial of who we are as a people. And this has been building up. And I think part of the reason is because the state of the government there has been under Netanyahu, which is very right. His cabinet is, a lot of his cabinet is where he gets his support. He had to make some concessions, very racist. They're outright racist. They'll tell you they want to get rid of the Palestinians. And it's a shame from what it was, say, 30 years ago to now. The whole demographic has shifted. There used to be quite a balance, but there doesn't seem to be anymore. Part of that might be because, one, I think Netanyahu, I truly believe he doesn't want peace. He lives by fear and by always stating security. Well, we found out things are still going on. Military isn't the solution. It is not the solution. It does not give them security, they're building these walls, building everything. KGB does not get them security. The only way to get security and peace is an equitable settlement. Things, if y'all remember in Oslo Accords that were discussed, the Palestinians, if they met certain things, were supposed to have their own country in 5 years. They met everything. Israel kept building settlements, which they weren't supposed to. They kept taking land they weren't supposed to. They kept limiting water rights, no state of Palestine. Then there was Oslo II, to further that, no state of Palestine. And still we are 30 years, no state of Palestine. A lot of people now, and a lot of Palestinians think, since Israel has already taken up so much land and divided everything, that there can't be a two-state solution anymore. It might have to be a one-state solution. It might have to be all Israel, and just make everyone equal. The problem with that is about 5 years ago, Israel has put in some laws into effect where it is now a Jewish state. So even though they say our residents are equal, if you're Jewish, you're under a different set of laws than you are if you're Palestinian descent. If you were living there, if you were born there, if your grandmother was there, you're under a different system than if you're Jewish. If you're Jewish and from New York or Tennessee, you could go to Israel right away and become a citizen. I can't do that, even though my family's been there. The people here were promised that they would be able to return to their homeland once they were forced out after Israel was created. That was a condition for Israel joining the UN, the right of return. The right of return is an international law. No one has, they're not allowed to return. They can't even go visit there unless they have special permission or might get a visa in. But these people are looking across that fence that was built at their villages, and most of them have been torn down and wiped out. But there's a Israeli who actually documented the villages that Israel wiped out. There was over 500 villages that they just wanted to destroy and wipe out. These people cannot return. These people here are in such, I think that's the whole West Bank, but Israel has control over each village. They can block it off immediately.
We have maps of
Yeah, so in the map, if y'all studied it, this was supposed to be all of Palestine here once the Oslo Accords were agreed to. Israel would still has some security concerns. They said those were supposed to be met, and they were all met. But they have taken, for settlements, they have taken a lot of the land for these settlers that, again, this is against international law. They have taken all the area around there where nothing is contiguous. Palestine has no sovereignty over its borders, over its land, over its water, over anything. There's no sovereignty there. Everything is controlled by Israel. Now, Israel always says security, security, security. Again, that's how they survive, and there are security concerns, no doubt about it. Certainly there are security concerns. But again, you cannot, no matter what is shown, the more they crack down or present in the area, the more tensions flare up. I've witnessed that myself. We talked to people there. If Israel would stay out of there in that role of arresting people and incarcerating them, taking children, over 400 kids are in Israeli prisons, not even, kids we're talking about, not even charged with anything, detained. That would be, if we said that in any other country, we'd be blasting it. But Israel gets a pass on that. Why is that? Why is that? Why does Israel get a pass on? Why does the U.S. and you might find Micronesia, the little countries that we say vote for this, side with Israel at the UN? Why is that? Well, it doesn't matter even if the whole world wanted a Palestine. As long as the U.S. doesn't want it, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. That's because our politics are entwined with Israel and with the political action committee that they have, that is the number one pack in America, and it has been a long time. They basically own, unfortunately, we feel they own most of our elected representatives. And it's gotten worse since there's been unlimited spending at the moment. So why is it, if you think common sense wise, why is it that we as Americans and our country is so against the rest of the world and what their thought process is? It just doesn't make sense, does it? Do we have values maybe that are above other people's values? We have certain values, sure, but can the whole world be wrong on this and we're right? Common sense would tell you no.
Dang, I'm wondering if we could do like 5 minutes of Q&A.
Sure, I'd love to.
If anyone has, I know I have a few questions.
Is your village still there, or is it been bulldozed?
What's that?
Is your village still there?
Our village is still there. Ours was a larger village than most. It had areas, and ours was in the West Bank.
Okay.
The ones that were demolished were the ones that were in Palestine, but when Israel created, they demolished. So there's a good book out by an Israeli, I don't recall his name, but you could probably Google it and find out. He actually documented all the villages because Israel said, well, we didn't wipe out any villages. Well, one thing that people did in their gardens, cactus is prevalent there. And the cactus, you can bulldoze it over, but it'll come back. So they visited these places and the villager would say, yes, my home was there, or this was here. And then the cactus came back, and then they saw that as proof that there was proof anyway, but they can go back to see where their homes was because of the cactus and everything. Yes?
I have another question, which is attention, and that is, from the Western perspective,
Yes.
how do we separate the Palestinian people from Hamas?
Well, so let me tell you, all Palestinians have been demonized by Israel for a long time, and in the press. You hear Palestinian, you hear terrorist, almost in the same word. So Palestinians to most, to people in the U.S. and to Israel are less than people. They're not human, they're less than, people. They're not. But differentiating, your question was how, or?
Most of my friends
Yes,
differentiate between what we see Hamas doing
that's right.
and
Regular
whether you're Christian,
Palestinians.
Muslim, or nothing.
That's right.
The people are different from that group.
Yes.
And my question is, how do we as Westerners understand that? And it sounds like one of the things that you're saying is one of the repairing postures would be if the press were more able to present Palestinians as people.
That's right. So as that, if people, like I said, when we took Americans there, it was basically it was a eye-opening experience type is what the reaction we got most of the time. The people were so hospitable, even those that we visited in the camps that had everything taken away from them. They just said, we just want peace and to live in peace and so we can raise our family, properly. That's all they can. If people saw that side of it and they were exposed to that side of it, they are a generous people. And most of them, not one of them that I met, there are, of course, some, and you have some radical influences and everything. And radical influences come when there's usually no hope and when there's no other way that's moving forward. That's when radicals build up. And unfortunately, what's going on there now is spreading here. I don't know if y'all know it, but in the past 6 weeks, close to 300 people have been killed by Israeli troops in the West Bank. You're not going to hear much of that. They've arrested, yesterday they shot 2 kids, 8 and 14-year-old. 8 kids I'm talking about. And, you talk about the prisoners released by Israel. And I'll get back to your question here. But the prisoners they're releasing prisoners. Most of them are kids and women that haven't been charged with anything yet, that are in prison over there. It's said that 25% of the people in the West Bank, the Palestinians, have been arrested at some time or another. 25%. And it's a collective type of thing. It's a collective punishment type of thing. You won't find probably on your hand how many Israeli settlers have been arrested, even though they kill people outright. They'll do it with soldiers present. They'll burn, I don't know if y'all saw a rampage one time. Over 100 cars were burned in the village when the Israeli settlers came through, and they just did a rampage on the thing. They shot a couple of people there. It was horrible. But I bet in one hand, you can't find the number of Israeli settlers arrested. Yet you have thousands of Palestinians that if a soldier says, well, they threw a rock at me, they'll take them in. One girl that was released yesterday on this prisoner swap, she wrote an Instagram post and she was arrested. So how can we differentiate? You got to understand the history of Hamas, how they came up really here. And it came up after when some tensions were going. Hamas was actually kind of supported by Israel as a counter to the PLO that was here. They didn't want the PLO over here and the people united, so they actually propped up Hamas in the early stages of Hamas. Hamas grew out of, they were providing the social services for the area. They were managing the hospitals, the trash pickup, stuff like that. When the peace process was not moving forward after several failed attempts, Hamas became more powerful. They became more powerful. They controlled the whole area of the Gaza Strip. Then they had a military wing of Hamas that's kind of separate, but it's still under Hamas. And that's who carried out the horrific attacks into Israel. So Hamas is more of a ideology that is a little different from the PA who was put in here to control the West Bank. But it sprang out because there was no movement on the peace process. There was no hope going forward. Israel was cracking down at the time quite a bit. Settlers were here and they were controlling the area. Israel troops were in here and the tensions were just high, and that's how they grew to be where they are now. And they continue to be. Hamas is an Islamic group. As a Christian, I don't appreciate that, or whether it's even if it was I'm against any type of religious thing when it comes to that. But that's how they grew. That's how they became to control things. Israel clamped down on a lot of this, and that's where that sprung up to. Gaza has Israel controls the air, the sea, the land of going into Gaza. So how can you have a viable economy, anything where you're controlled by here? Gazans used to be agricultural, citrus, and fishing. And they can't do that because Israel has cut down to the area to how far they can go. But how can you have any hope for your kids? And I'm speaking of Gaza in general, not Hamas, but I'm showing you kind of how they were able to grow in influence is because of the crackdown that Israel was doing. Again, it becomes more radicalized the worse conditions get. What other way, might there be? If there's not going to be anything, and how long is it? What's a timetable on this? What's a timetable? Another 75 years?
Is the PLO still active?
They are. So the PLO, the PA grew out of the PLO. The PLO was at this point before the PA was formed. The PLO in their main group was Fatah, as you might say. They controlled this area, and they had some control of Gaza. When the PA was formed, that was formed out of Oslo, the Palestinian Authority. So they came onto an umbrella type thing, where the different factions and everything came together, and then they would govern this area. And they were supposed to be the governing body once they became had their statehood. Of course, that never happened. The PA now is very weak. In fact, the U.S. backs the PA monetarily and stuff like that, but for the most part, it's corrupt as well. It's under the influence, basically, of the U.S. It's very weak. It's meant to control the people and actually cooperate with Israel in security things. So a lot of people there, because things are happening like this and because things are flaring up, that even makes the PA's role weaker. And radical groups are going to start popping up here because of what's going on.
Yeah, there's a weakness. Yeah.
Because of the weakness, there's no way forward in the peace process. It's not moving forward, and that's what's going to happen. It's even going to get weaker.
Thank you.
So the people there are very innovative, and it's amazing what they get by with how much control. But Israel has shut down a lot of institutions in the West Bank. There used to be a justice placed in, it would be called the law, but it was called Al-Haq. They used to document all the resources that were taken from Palestine that Israel uses. They would document the water rights. They would document how many people were displaced, how much farmland was taken by the settlers, things like that. Well, Israel shut them down 2 years ago. They called them a terrorist organization, as supporting terrorists. They're limiting now how many Western educators can teach in the area as well. The military, you got to know that the military actually is over this part. It's not Israel civil service or law or anything like that. Military has their own law, so basically they can do whatever they want to do. They can do whatever they want to do.
Israel's military?
Israel's military, yes. Yeah. So as things get worse, as there's no hope for peace, if it keeps continuing, this is going to become more radicalized, unfortunately.
And they keep getting squeezed and squeezed and squeezed.
That's right. When you take away your water rights, when you have settlers, unfortunately terrorize your village, when you have Israeli troops that will just stand by and let them do it. And unfortunately, this government that we have now in Israel supports all that. Now, there was, if you'll look it up, actually last week, one of the prior mayors of Jerusalem, he was prime minister as well of Israel, Ehud Olmert, if you want to look it up. He actually said the only way to have peace is to get rid of the settlements in here. And he knows that. Practically, you cannot have a population that keeps taking land and is forced there and keep taking Palestinian land all the time. During Oslo, there was probably 150,000 settlers. Now there's currently over 700,000 settlers in Palestine.
Do you still have family there?
I do, yes, yeah.
Are you able to stay in touch?
Yeah. We have, the town we're from, Ramallah, about right here. It's kind of its own little island. It's fortunate in a way. It's very secular. You'd basically everyone would feel very right at home there. I mean, there's restaurants, there's bars, there's everything there. It's its own little island because it had the most area around it. Most of them were farmers back then. They had fig farms or olive farms or such like that. You know, it was its own little island, but that became, because it had the land and it was already quite a city, the PA made their headquarters there. And so there are embassies there, there's governmental services there, there's high rises there, things like that. So it doesn't look like really the rest of the West Bank. You know, Bethlehem is somewhat, but much smaller. But Ramallah is where everything takes place, and that's where my, you know, that's where my heritage is from.
It seems like a lot of our administrations, including this one, have advocated for a two-state solution.
Yes.
And is your point that there's so much influence against, not against, but influence for legislators to be opposed to it? I'm curious, in my mind, I was thinking that the U.S. position was a two-state solution for Israel and Palestine.
So it has been for the longest time a two-state solution, and the U.S. policy until Trump came in was no settlements. You know, we were always opposed. The U.S. was always opposed to settlements on Palestinian land. That changed when Trump came in. You know, he endorsed that. He said, y'all, you know, Israel can have, it's not for him to say, but he says, you can have what you captured, you can annex the West Bank if you want, you can annex the Golan Heights, you know. Stuff that was taken in '67 by international law was supposed to be given back. So in the case of the two-state solution, before, yes, you heard quite a bit about the two-state solution during Oslo and stuff like that. And then there was a tendency to just kind of forget about it. Well, lately, some in Israel know that you have to have, what they don't want to do is absorb all these people now. Because that's 2 million Palestinians here, 2 million Palestinians here. If they absorbed it, then they said they would lose their Jewish identity. So now the two-state solution over the past 2 years has come back. But that two-state solution isn't this. It is these little pockets of controlled areas. That's not a solution. That is not
I'll
a
pass
solution.
around this map again. I have in the slide that I'll look in a second. These pockets get smaller and smaller and smaller. So there's almost no roadways between the different
So it
villages.
wouldn't be the West Bank per se.
Well, it's supposed to be. This is what Oslo was based on. With some security arrangements with Israel on the borders and stuff. That's mostly what it was raining. When the Arabs had the Arab summit in 2000, they saw, well, Oslo's not working, Israel's not moving forward. They actually proposed to Israel, okay, give back 67 like you're supposed to, go back to the borders. You know, we know you have huge settlements here and here. We'll trade you some land for that. And once you do that, every single Arab country will immediately recognize Israel's right to exist and cooperate with them security-wise. That was a wonderful thing. What else could you want? Everyone says peace. It wasn't accepted. It wasn't accepted. The government in Israel now does not want peace. The longer they can drag things out, the peace process has only gotten the Palestinians less land and given Israel more control of land. That's what the peace process has done. And that's what people are realizing. That by stalling, they can keep building settlements, they can keep taking lands, and the settlement population grows. In Hebron, have anyone been to Hebron? I'm sure a lot of you have been to Jerusalem. Maybe not. Okay. So Hebron is where the tomb of Abraham is. So back in, I think it was the 90s, there was an American Jewish person, Goldstein was his name, a doctor, a PhD doctor, I think. He shot up and killed 29 people in the mosque. Because of that, Israel clamped down on the Palestinians. They put turnstiles in to visit that Mosque of Abraham, which is actually also a shared Jewish synagogue there. It's shared, and it has been for centuries, been shared there. They put in turnstiles, they controlled that, they brought in, and a settlement arose in Hebron. They brought in 2,500 soldiers to protect 200 settlers there. They closed down one of the main streets of Hebron, closed it down completely. No Palestinians can walk on. They welded all the front doors shut. The people, if they want to go in their homes, have to go in through ladders of their windows in their backyard, or they've cut holes through neighbors' houses just so they can get to theirs. It's truly amazing, fascinating that this stuff can go on, and we support it. It truly is. Again, if it was anyone else but Israel, but somehow they have a bypass with us. And there are several good groups that you all should look into, Israeli groups like Breaking the Silence. These are soldiers who refuse to serve in the West Bank because they know what's going on. There's for Not My Name, that's another Jewish group. There's Jewish Voice for Peace, which the Anti-Defamation League has now called anti-Semitic. They're Jews, and they call it anti-Semitic because they don't agree with the occupation of Palestine. There'll be other Jews that call them, well, they're not really Jews, because they do this. All because of Israel. There's some rabbis that don't recognize Israel. They said Israel's not a state, it's a people. Let's not covet this state, in our name. There's some rabbis against Israel, the state of Israel.
Thank you for sharing with us.
Sure. Well,
I'm curious.
Where's the hope?
Where's the hope?
The hope, unfortunately, there's, if you've noticed, just in this conflict, it brings out a lot of things, of course. If you're on social media, you see 90% of it is pro-Palestinian, typically, because they know for so long that these people have been waiting and waiting and waiting. And Israel says, well, they're all terrorists, we got to worry about our security. Again, military is not the hope. It has to be an equitable solution for both people. Both people have to be comfortable with it. Both people have to understand that, but you have to move forward. You can't keep a population of that sort down. When these people mostly were of European descent. They're in a land that Christians, Muslims, and Jews were in for a long time. And everyone says the conflict has been going on for thousands of years. It hasn't. They were all living there together all this time until the Zionist movement started. And it was a cultural difference. That's besides the point. There still has to be some type of negotiated settlement that is fair and equitable. Otherwise, there will be turmoil. There has to be some sort of return of some people back to their villages, back to their lands. You can't have extremism here that can do what they want to. Fortunately, the State Department's been pretty good, and they were on a different note than actually Biden. When Biden wholeheartedly support whatever Israel wanted to do at first, now he's backtracking because he's seeing such a destruction and all the mayhem and all the innocent lives killed. But the State Department from the beginning was a little more in tune to what was going on, and has been. They've always been against the radicalism of the settlements towards the Palestinian in their own land. So the hope is only some type of solution where as we know it's equitable. Something can't be forced upon them. If it's forced, it's not gonna last. So, thank you all.
That's a lot of good insight.
Well, it's again, do your own research with those groups, because don't just take one side. So.
Well, I would say for me, this is not. Thank you for sharing. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I think when you study into the history, I know for me it's eye-opening, and it kind of changes things. I'm going to shift what we were going to do today, because Danny is a lot more informative about all of this than any of us are, I think, and definitely than I am. So we are going to change what we're doing. And I wanted to show you two sources, and then we're going to do a prayer thing together. Let's see what this one for that. Oh, yeah, actually, let me go. I'm going to share this little, just an update on the conflict. So, since things have happened, since we looked last time, so this is the annual rates for Israel and Palestinians of death rates. And you'll notice that this year the number has skyrocketed and jumped. And so the number as of now, and I think I have this back here, there's about 15,000 Palestinians. And this was as of, these facts are from yesterday, that have been killed since October 7th. And as a reminder of what happened on October 7th, that was when the Hamas group came in. There was about 1,200 people that were killed in Israel, and about 7,000 were captured. So since then, there's been about 15,000 deaths. And of the deaths in Palestine, 4 out of 10 are children, which makes those numbers feel heavier. This is from November 6th, so this is a little bit older now. But this is the death rate of different conflicts in the world involving children. So you'll notice the one for Palestine happens to be a lot higher. In Gaza Strip, and I'm not sure about West Bank, about half the population is under 18. And there's many different factors for that. But when we're talking about bombing these cities, realize half that city is made up of kids.
Well, but keep in mind, Ukraine is over a 2-year period, and Gaza is over a 2-month period.
Yeah, and this number here, including Ukraine, I think Ukraine.
You have
it stops in October, and it goes to November 6th. I had to put that note on there. This is from CNN, and I'm going to include a link. But there's 2 things I wanted to show, and I think we're going to shift our gear instead of watching those other videos and looking at Zionism today. I'm going to pass this around. So this is a litany that was written by a Palestinian American priest in Texas, and then it was used for a day in the Diocese of Jerusalem that they got to use this. And I thought it would be meaningful, at least for us to look at it, but I think it would be great if we could also pray this together. There's also, if you want to get to this litany, I have a link to it already up on the website, but it's thankfulpriest.com. And there's also on the Episcopal Church, and I have a link to this as well. This is from the Office of Government Relations, but they have a whole host of different sources that you can get hearing from different priests and pastors about this, as well as reliable and good news sources. And that was where I found this litany. Would y'all want to do this together? I think that would be meaningful.
Is it one sheet?
It is a front and a back. It's just one sheet. But I think let's plan to do this. And Danny, I'm really glad that you got to come and share with us.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and about 2 minutes after you started talking, I was like, yeah, he just needs to keep talking.
Well, questions are always the greatest thing because, and again, questions are great because you should question everything. You should do your own research and there's a lot of misinformation out there as well. So use the common sense that God gave us and, do your own research, basically.
Well, let's do this together. And does anyone feel like they would really want to be the leader of it?
That's why you're hired.
I hear my voice too much. Okay.
Your dress for the big bucks.
All right, here we go.
It's a big bucks.
God of love, you created all people as one family and called us to live together in justice, harmony, and peace. Surround us with your love as we pray for the Holy Land. Lord, in your mercy,
Hear our prayer.
God of righteousness, who demands that our worldly governors take up their responsibility to protect those in charge and uphold the dignity of all human beings, pour your wisdom into the leaders of this world, especially Benjamin Netanyahu, the leaders of Hamas, and Joe Biden, for all who bear such responsibility, that they may put the good of the whole over their own greed for power. Lord, in your mercy,
Hear our prayer.
God of compassion, who even in the darkest of times shows us your path. We give you thanks for all those who, in the faith of crisis, wrought by evildoers, work to help the helpless, to hold out hope to the desolate, to speak for the voiceless, and to bring understanding and knowledge to a world darkened by ignorance and hate. For our siblings who risk much aid to others, that their actions may be successful and their words may be heard. Lord, in your mercy,
Hear our prayer.
God of mercy, who binds up the wounds of those who suffer, bless the victims of the consequences of fear and hate. In the last few months and over the past 75 years of the conflict in the Holy Land, those injured and traumatized, those bereaved and grieving, those held as captives and prisoners, those who face deprivation and desperation because of the systems of violence and oppression, so that they may move forward in this life standing firm in your truth and avoiding the temptation of vengeance. For all those who are forever marked by suffering, that they may be blessed with the hope of your presence. Lord, in your mercy,
Hear our prayer.
God of life, whose faithfulness to us is never ending, we remember before you those who have died by the violence that has become shockingly routine in your holy land. Receive them into your heart, where they may know the peace and joy of eternal life in you. For all who have died, that they may rest in the place where pain is no more. Lord, in your mercy,
Hear our prayer.
God of justice, who calls us to uphold the dignity of every human being, every child of this earth, beloved of you, empower your church to help you heal this terrible cycle of violence and revenge. Give us courage to rise above our fear that nothing can be done in the face of conflict and chaos of our own creating. Grant us the conviction to advocate for change and to work for the establishment of your peace, your shalom, your salam, in this broken world. For your dream of justice and peace on earth, and for us that we may take up your call to build it. Lord, in your mercy,
Hear our prayer.
all this we pray in the name of the one who offered his life so that we might live, Jesus Christ. Amen. I saw this and it was meaningful for me, so I hope it's meaningful for you. We're going to just throw this away and open up the rest of the time to do more Q&A for those that have.
Well, sure. I'd be happy to. One thing I do want to say is, most people there, you'll hear a lot of talk of saying, well, the Palestinians just want to get rid of the Jews or they want to destroy Israel. That's not the case. Everyone knows Israel's not going anywhere. It's not. Jews have been there a long time. A lot of my cousins actually several of my cousins have Jewish grandmothers, No, it's when some people want to make it that if you criticize Israel, they automatically say you're anti-Semitic. That's a thing going on now. It has been going on for a long time. Even Jews that would speak for Palestine, they would say, and before, I remember 45 years ago at UT, that they would say, well, you're a self-hating Jew, That term has gone away, and now they're telling Jews now, like Jewish Voice for Peace, well, they're not really Jewish, And they're calling any question that is anti-Israel, anti-Semitic. That's not the case. Sure, you might hear Hamas say, yes, we want to wipe out Israel. You'll hear that. That's not the general feeling. That might be, the radical of the radical extreme. They are peaceful people. They are loving people. They can forgive and forget. So don't let that, if you do come to find that you want to speak for the Palestinians or even against an Israeli action, I think you should feel free to do so without trying to be labeled, as being anti-Semitic. And the other thing you'll hear, and I'll come to your question, when you hear some people talk about the demonstrations that go on, I mean, these are huge demonstrations, and there are Americans taking place, and there's Jews taking place in them, and there's people of color taking place in these demonstrations. You'll hear them say, well, these are Hamas supporters. That's not the case. They want to bring this to the attention of the world because it's almost become forgotten again. That's what they're doing. They are not Hamas supporters. When you can get 500,000 people in London marching through without hardly any incident at all, that's amazing. Same in Washington here. No incidents that I heard of. I mean, that's amazing. And you'll usually get people in there to try to disrupt. That's not amazing. So, and again, please, this is one side. You should hear from Jews. You should hear from Israelis. You should hear from Muslims. You should hear from all over. Gather the facts and use your, let's all use our brains to discern what is right, morally right, from a humanistic point of view as well, what is right, and what as a people, does our conscience allow, these things to keep happening.
Well, my dilemma, the whole thing is just so beyond distressing, beyond heartbreaking.
Yes.
What I can't figure out, given that Hamas's goal is to destroy Israel and eliminate Jews, and given the fact that Hamas is thoroughly entrenched in the Gaza Strip, how do you think Hamas can be destroyed without this horrific, unconscionable devastation? The way I put it in my mind, I was thinking, say Florida is Israel, and say Cuba is Hamas, and Fidel Castro has vowed to destroy Florida, and he sent his troops to Florida, and they kidnapped 1,500 people, and what would our response be? What can a response be when you feel so threatened by a subgroup in a country that you can't survive if they survive?
Well, I'll give you some history on that. So, terrorism in Palestine wasn't brought on by the Palestinians. It was brought on by Jewish groups. There were Garn and the Sturm Gang, if you want to see the history of that. And some of Israel's leaders were part of those. Admittedly, they took part in horrific things that went on. There was, if you want to look up the terrorist actions of Jews towards Palestinians, you should read that. That gives you history only because some of the leaders of Israel were the head of these gangs or part of these gangs that did this terrorist gangs that did that. Menachem Begin, Yitzhak Shamir, they were all considered terrorists before they became into the mainstream of Israel politics. They also were able to make peace and to change. Hamas, you can't destroy Hamas if the current situation, you can't. You just can't. You're not going to destroy radicalism by making it still tougher on a people. If Hamas goes, someone else will come up. You can't get rid of it unless the lives change and the outlook change and there's hope. It cannot change.
That's the rub. There.
Okay, you may say so, but so what is the what is the price? Kill 500,000 people to get rid of Hamas? You can't, as long as there is no, if there's no hope, if there's no future for your kids, if you can't provide for your families, people turn to the extremes. Yasser Arafat, and Itzhak Shamir and Rabin, Nobel Prizes for coming to peace and an agreement and such like that. Same thing with Hamas. They may say something, they may do something, they will, but again, history shows you that it can change, and history will show you that as doesn't matter a couple of hundred years later, things will flare up again if things aren't dealt with properly.
So you think there's hope for Hamas to have a change of?
Well, so there's Hamas that takes care of most of the infrastructure, and then there's the military wing of Hamas. So keep in mind that when the PA came about in Oslo, the PA wanted to, and the PLO wanted to form with Hamas to form a unity thing that would have brought some moderation in it. Israel was against that, and they wouldn't allow that. They wanted to keep them divided. Divided, you're less strong. So had that taken place, it would have been much more moderate than it is now. So would there have been peace? Probably not, because it hasn't been put forward. But Israel was the one against Hamas and the PLO coming together and forming a unity type of government where there would have been moderation. But can it change? I think it can. Am I for the military wing of Hamas? Of course not. But that's going to stay, and someone else will take its place if nothing is done, unfortunately.
You've made your point about the U.S. supporting Israel, which, I don't think anybody could disagree with that.
Yeah.
Whether you
our government,
they do. The government.
Yeah.
If Hamas is the territory and people are so disheveled and the military is taking over, and there's little for a lot of young Palestinians to do.
Yes.
You've already said that Israel has taken out the air, the sea, and the land.
That's right.
Boxed in Gaza. Okay. Where is Hamas getting its funds to exist? Is it another international group?
Yeah, so Hamas gets its funding from several groups. Again, there's the military, and then there's the ones that do civil service, things like that, runs the medical, runs there's two different organizations. So that has to be supported. The economy of Gaza can't support itself with that constriction. It just can't. So they have to get funding outside. So the Arab states do that. They say Iran does that. I don't know if they do or not, but certainly they try to get what they can.
Thank you.
Good seeing y'all. Sure.
It is one. Yeah.
So and there is unemployment is Gaza is above 60%, and as Alexander mentioned, the 50% of the population is unemployed. What do you do for these people? If they had the fishing rights, by international law, they're supposed to have 20-something miles of international, but that's cut off. If they had their agricultural lands that they could, do. Gaza has been destroyed several times. This is the worst of the destruction, but it's been destroyed several times. One funny thing is when Israel, if y'all remember, it was hitting that hospital, and Israel said there's a command center there, and then they went in devastating. And then they found a bunker. They said, "Oh, we found a bunker. This is proof that Hamas was here." Well, it came out in the Israeli press that Israel actually built that hospital, and they built the bunker. They built the bunker because they do in all their facilities. They build the bunker, And what they find? One laptop in the hospital, maybe, and 3 guns and stuff. That's not a command center. But they devastated everyone in there. Everyone in there. And does that make sense to a hospital? What if there was a tunnel under there? There's tunnels all over the place in Gaza. Is that a reason to devastate a hospital that's trying to care for people and these babies that had the incubator? I mean, it's so devastating to think of that. And okay, Israel will say, and they're not, they'll say, oh, we have targeted strikes. We're sorry we killed 15,000 people. They're hiding behind Hamas. They use that in every sentence. There was a friend of mine who, I don't know if y'all knew it, there's an Orthodox church in Gaza. A friend of mine, his family was there to go for protection and everything. Israel hit the church. 5 of his family members were killed. 5 of his family. Israel says they have targeted strikes. That was all indiscriminate. Most of this bombing is indiscriminate to put a hardship on the people there. 2/3 of the Gaza has been displaced. Everyone moving south, no homes. Let's think of that when we're having our Christmas dinners, that a mother and her family are living in tents of plastic, and they're learning if their baby is gonna, who has diarrhea already and other stuff, is gonna survive. We have to take this approach that, why are so many people against the ceasefire that might bring some moderation to this and some hope that there could be a resolution? Why are so many people against the ceasefire? At least have a pause and give some sense of some negotiations or something taking place. Israel says they're going to resume everything as soon as the hostage swap is over. The U.S. is trying to put pressure on Israel not to have this indiscriminate destruction going on. But again, under this government in Israel, they're going to do what they can and what they can get away with. And it's terrible.
Can you give me a comparison of what the size of Gaza is maybe compared to a town? Or
So Gaza is about 20-something miles by about 7 miles, I think. It was
10 miles.
It could be.
I think it's at the biggest point.
Maybe so, but it's not that big,
And what was the population prior?
Almost 2 million.
2.2 million.
Wow.
What is it? Oh,
2.2 million. So that when they say they built tunnels under a hospital or this and use it, there's tunnels everywhere, basically. There's tunnels everywhere. So at what point do we say enough is enough? Is it 200,000 or is it stopping at 15,000? They say that because, and not only that, get this, so not only the bombing going on, but they cut off food and they cut off water. They control everything. The sewage system can't work because they've cut the electricity. Everything is dependent on Israel. Everything is dependent on Israel. If y'all had a farm and had a good neighbor that surrounded you, yeah, you could rely on them. If you don't have a good neighbor around you, you're cut off. How can you cut off food and water for over a month to a population like that, and medical supplies and everything else? To me, that's devastating.
So are Gaza, this may be a question I should know, answer, I should
Yeah.
know, but I don't.
Yeah.
Are Gaza and the West Bank a part of Israel?
No, so this
Then
is
how does Israel get away with doing that then? Because they don't.
because the UN. That's the question. The U.S. lets them.
See, I'm gonna sit real quick because I've got to actually pack up my stuff to go pick up Poppy.
Sure.
Okay, I have 2 questions. One, do you all want to do the presentation next week? So we're going to look at Zionism and a little bit more of history.
Yeah, they're done.
Okay,
Yeah.
we will dive into that next week.
It's gonna be here for a while.
I'm gonna go ahead and send out some of the other interviews that were with some Holocaust survivors. So one of them is with Holocaust survivors living in Israel, telling their own experiences. It is an older video. It's like 5 years old, so it's not as relevant. Another one is from an American Holocaust survivor that just came out like a couple of weeks ago. I think it was like 3 weeks old. And it's very, very short. I'm going to go ahead and send those out. And then we'll do our presentation next week, which is actually already uploaded. So if you want to see it, you can go ahead and watch it.
I used to do interviews for the Shoah Foundation, which documented these Holocaust survivors. One of the guys I remember, he was living in Sevierville, about 90 years old. You know, he was talking to me. I said,